my newfound friend Roger Averill, who also works at VU. In 2009, the wonderful independent publisher Transatlantic, based in the heart of the western suburbs, published Roger Averill's travel memoir, Boy He Cried, An Island Oddessy. In 2010, Roger read an abridged version of that book on Radio National's First Person program and also published the novel Keeping Faith. Could you please welcome to the Rotunda stage Mr. Roger Averill.
For most of the past 20 years, I've thought of my love of writing more as an addiction than a romance, as something that has brought me moments of bliss and a point of focus, but also cravings and compulsions that have at times threatened to ruin me. In truth, I have little experience of drugs or gambling or other more conventional forms of addiction. I am, I'm afraid, too daggy for that, no beatnik chic for me. But I have heard it said that a love of softer substances can lead to harder, fiercer ardours. And so it was with me and writing. It began, I guess, with listening to Bob Dylan mainly, the way he made words wail and hiss, bend and snap. For a time, when I was 15 and 16, it seemed Bobby Boy had found words and music for all the feelings coursing through me. Love, lust, betrayal, rage, righteousness, laughter, despair, meanness, tenderness, transcendence. But then, as is the way of these things, even that was not enough. I wanted more. Of course, I listened to a lot of other music too, but I also began to read beyond the requirements of school, and then later those of university. In one very important way, words had always been with me, or more specifically, one word, the word. My parents were and remain committed Christians, and all through my childhood I read the Bible every night before going to sleep. I told you I was daggy. In that way, I'd always known the power and comfort of invocations. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And of the importance of words. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was God. Perhaps then, it is not surprising that as I drifted from the faith of my parents, I continued to look for meaning in words. I had, of course, been reading all along, Agatha Christie, Alistair MacLean, Ian Fleming, but now I brought a yearning to the task, an expectation that it would do more than entertain, that it would move and entrance me and make me think, provide me with a portal into the hearts and minds and experiences of others. It was by this route that I discovered the joys of literature. The problem was, though, my reading increased rather than quelled my yearning. I needed something stronger. I'd come to understand that words are magic, scratches and sighs that conjure worlds, thoughts, emotions. And for whatever reason, whatever egoistic drive, my love of other people's words resulted in me wanting to summon my own. Not satisfied with reciting the spells of others, I wanted to write them myself. The American writer Richard Ford is the best I've read on motivations for writing. He speaks of it as a way of paying greater attention to life, of instilling it with import, with meaning, at least of the kind bestowed by the creation of order through narrative. In his now justly famous introductory essay to the Granted Book of American Short Story, he suggests that most of his stories were written because lived life somehow wasn't enough. In some way didn't hit the last note convincingly and was too quickly gone. Looking back, I realised that was a large part of why I started writing, as a means of making more of life, of making meaning for my own. In my early 20s, I began writing poems, a handful of which were published in a couple of local journals. This, at an early age, affirmed a dangerous connection in my mind between writing and publishing. Having finished an arts degree, I decided to write a novel. I loved the charge I felt when writing a poem, and I wanted to experience that in a more sustained and structured way, to be less dependent on what I hoped had been inspiration. Besides, I knew just enough to know the depth of my ignorance of the poetic craft, so rather than knuckle down and learn about that, I somehow managed to convince myself it would be easier or smarter to switch genres. I was then living in an old caretaker's residence in the heart of the city, and every weekday I'd take the short walk from my Russell Street eyrie to the State Library, where over a few months I joyfully filled a couple of foolscap ledgers with what became the first draft of my first attempt at writing a novel. I love the writing process, the ordering of my imagination, the vaguely mysterious production of images, characters, story. Richard Ford has often quoted Henry Thoreau's line that a writer is someone who, having nothing to do, finds something to do. During those happy months in the State Library in 1987, I found something to do. I was, it seems, a writer, an addict. Given the upbeat title, Promising Death, I obviously had my eye on the small but significant Albie Singer market with the Woody Allen character from Annie Hall who only buys books with the word death in the title. The manuscript itself showed a glimmer of promise, so that in rejecting it, one prominent agent compared it to Samuel Beckett's My Own Dies. No doubt a throwaway comment, it nonetheless was enough to sustain my fantasies for years to come. Friends too said generous and encouraging things about the manuscript, mainly I imagine because they were vaguely impressed that I'd actually done what I'd set out to do. Fortunately, one friend, Chris Iper, had more than gentle affirmation to offer. Chris was a lecturer in the Sociology and Anthropology department at La Trobe University, and I'd taken his anthropology elective in honours. Having several unpublished novels of his own shoved in the drawers of various desks, he generously, foolishly offered to read my manuscript. Expecting that he too would simply be impressed that I'd managed to string so many sentences together to create a coherent narrative, I was shocked when, a few weeks later, he handed me back my once pristine, neatly typed pages to discover them seemingly blood-soaked, covered in red ink. Hardly a sentence had been spared, and none of my ego. From that point on, Chris became my one-person creative writing course, patiently teaching me the unglamorous joys of editing, of drafting and redrafting, of craft. And so it was that as my more sensible friends strapped on the responsibilities of careers and mortgages, I embraced a life of rental accommodation and part-time employment. For years working the weekend shifts as a labour ward attendant, cleaning up afterbirth at the Royal Women's Hospital, just so I could support my habit, could pursue my passion for writing. By way of an aside, this I think speaks to one of the limitations of the rational choice theory that dominates so much of our public policy. For while it is true to say that I was privileged enough to be able to choose this path, it was equally true to say that at no time did it feel like I was making a choice. I wonder, do any of us really choose our loves? In the early 1990s, Chris had 2 novels published in quick succession. This again confirmed for me that a love of writing is rightfully consummated in the passionate embrace of publication. Surely, I thought, my time would come. As it turned out, in terms of publishing, my love of writing was to remain unrequited for 20 years. I won't bore you with a blow-by-blow account of the failed second novel, the rejected short stories, or even the third publishable novel written in my late 20s, which received a rejection from Allen and Unwin that I would have happily used as a commendation on its hoped-for cover. Suffice to say that by the time I was in my mid-30s, the sense of direction writing had given me 10 years earlier, by then seemed to be pointing one way, down a cul-de-sac of regret and self-recrimination. In bleaker moments, I tortured myself with the question, why had I dedicated my adult life to this disdainful lover? Of course, I knew the answer. I still loved writing. Its purposeful solitude, the problem-solving daydreams, those rare, cherished moments when the blunt and angular shapes of letters combine into something of beauty. Another, more searching question was, why did I need a market I didn't respect to legitimate my love? For a while I avoided this question by writing for a different audience, the 3 examiners who came to mark my doctoral thesis, one of whom struggled with the fact that even here I managed to smuggle in some fiction. Then, after the birth of my 2 daughters had given me a new perspective and the task of being their stay-at-home dad a new direction, I believed that I'd become reconciled with my lot as an unpublished writer. My love of writing had brought me close to despair, but now I saw its absurdity as quixotic, as Sisyphean, and strangely noble. It was on that basis that I told myself I'd write an account of the year my partner, Shelley, and I had lived on an isolated island off the southeastern tip of Papua New Guinea. I was doing it for our girls, I said to myself, as a record of this one adventurous episode in their parents' otherwise boring lives. All the while, though, I knew that deep down I still hoped my love would be consummated, which is why I call it an addiction. Because in my desperation to have one last hit, a final roll of the dice, it had me trying to deceive myself. When Transit Lounge accepted the manuscript that became Boy He Cried, I literally couldn't believe it, not until I held the book in my hand. Finally, the old pattern of rejection and near misses had been broken, and I had made the transition from writer to author. Surely now I'd enjoy a simple sense of fulfilment. But no. All those rejections had bent me a certain way, so that a perverse part of me felt that my being published somehow betrayed my unpublished self and all the other unknown writers who, through bad luck and no lack of effort, would forever remain on the wrong side of the published-unpublished divide. Fittingly, perhaps, given my background, my redemption carried a certain guilt. Only a few weeks ago, one of my colleagues in the liberal arts program at VU College, Marcus Niski, showed me the transcript of an unpublished interview he conducted with Richard Ford in 2007. At the end of their long exchange, Marcus asked Ford what advice he would give young writers starting out. Deadpan, I imagine. Ford replied, "Talk yourself out of it." After a further prompt, he elaborated, "Yeah, I mean, it's the same reason that you'd try to talk yourself out of getting married if you possibly could, which is to say it's going to last a long time and probably isolate you and bring you to woes if it doesn't work well. If you can't talk yourself out of it, just like if you can't talk yourself out of getting married, maybe you're in love." Having recently published a third book, Exile, The Lives and Hopes of Werner Pelz, I now know that books, or at least the ones I write, pretty much come and go, and that what endures for the writer is the act of writing itself, the complex pleasure it brings. Addict or not, author or not, I now know I always was and still remain in love.